action to resolve it. I am joined with Mark Sleboda, international relations and security analyst, and easily one of my favorite people to talk to, and somebody that I deeply appreciate for giving me the time of day. Mark, how you doing this morning, man? You doing all right? Well, morning for me, evening for you. How you doing today?
Jamaro, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show.
Mark, it's always an honor and a pleasure to have you. I don't have you for long today because we have to end at 7:30, but I definitely wanted to get you on, and I thank you for joining me. The allowance, Joe Biden has effectively is whistling past the graveyard and has allowed long-range strikes into Russia. Now, as I sent you the message, this concerns me greatly because A, he's a lame duck president. B, I'm not even entirely sure of his motivation for doing it, and I want to get your take on that. But what is the conversation in Russia right now? Putin has said this was a red line. Do you believe he's going to stand by the red line comment? And what does it mean in real terms about it being a red line? Give me your thoughts.
Okay, so Putin has definitely made clear before that the U.S. conducting long-range missile strikes into Russian territory, at least Russia pre 2014 Russia, because, of course, the longer-range ATACMS ballistic missiles have already been used on targets in Crimea, in the Donbass, and, I think it's fair to say that Russia has already demonstrated significant capability to bring down these weapons with air defense and electronic warfare, such that Western media reports have noted that the weapons are effective less than 10% of the time. So, as to how Russia will respond, right? Previously, Russia has said that they would consider this essentially an act of war, right? Because Putin has gone into great detail describing how that these missiles have to be operated by U.S. troops, right? The satellite data for the targeting, right? It's got a range of around 190 miles, around 300 kilometers. They have to be fired from one of the Kiev regime's existing HIMARS or M270 systems. The satellite data has to be inputted, and the missiles have to be programmed for the flight sequence. And that has proprietary software data that simply there's no way that the U.S. would transfer that to the Kiev regime side. So there are U.S. military specialists on the ground operating these weapons. And we know this because the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, said as much. He said exactly that. And he was speaking more specifically of the British Storm Shadows and Scalps, but he also made reference to the U.S. systems and German generals plotting to blow up the Crimean Bridge with Taurus cruise missiles, the audio of which was linked, noted the same thing and talked about maybe we could get some of those American those people with American accents on the ground to fire our systems as well. That was the oblique way they talked about it. So because this is an American weapon fired by Americans using American intelligence deep into Russia, that the Russian government would consider this an act of war. They would reserve the right to strike directly against U.S. targets. But he also went on to basically make clear that they would more probably do some sort of attack through a third party, through a proxy, right? A thinly veiled proxy, much like the Kiev regime forces in Ukraine. And previously, CNN and other Western media have reported on how Russia was last autumn, earlier this autumn, was about to launch, was about to provide the Houthis in Yemen with long-range anti-ship missiles capable of bringing down U.S. carriers and military ships. and that the Biden administration apparently at the time talked them back, presumably by agreeing not to going ahead with the long-range strike that they're going to now. So if that story is true, then it is very likely that we could see the Houthis armed with longer range, more effective anti-ship missiles, and almost certainly having the satellite data needed to more accurately target them as well. So that is probably the most obvious. Now, there is a question of whether Russia will respond to this, despite a red line being crossed. And there's a couple of reasons for this.
Yeah.
First and foremost is this is an obvious attempt by, as you said, a lame duck president to further involve the U.S. Into the conflict, to make it harder for the president-elect Donald Trump to enact any type of quote unquote deal or peace plan or even de-escalation, whatever you have it. He wants to get the U.S. as involved in as he can. The second point, so that may change, right? When Trump assumes office, he hasn't given any signals yet, but he could theoretically revoke this, right? Quite easily, and that this would be a very temporary measure. So he has reason to not want to escalate, you could argue, right on the eve of Trump's election, depending on what the Russian goals are. Maybe they don't care. They've already seemed to indicate that they don't believe that a new president will mean any change in U.S. policy in Ukraine. They've been very explicit in saying that. But the other reason is because the New York Times, while they're speaking to anonymous officials, and none of this is confirmed, they went on further to suggest that these strikes, at least in the beginning, could be restricted to a narrow range of territory in the Kursk region, supposedly the Kursk region of Russia, supposedly where the North Korean troops are, the invisible North Korean special forces super soldiers that no one has actually seen or provided any evidence of yet, except for the ghost of Kiev. Evidently, the ghost of Kiev has been involved in fierce battles. And the ghosts of the Snake Island martyrs. They've been. So, I mean, this is the justification that is being put forward in the media for these attacks about the North Koreans, right? That
now we know why they brought them up. I mean, because I was like, okay, what is with this North Korean thing? Why do they keep bringing this up?
Now, this is exactly why Zelensky, I believe, created this fiction until presented with any evidence. As far as I'm concerned, it's fan fiction. But that is to get exactly, the steps like this that they had been pushing for, that NATO had denied them. So you see what he's doing by providing a narrow range of targets just in one Russian region. He's very, very thinly attempting to slice the salami. And this is what the U.S. has done this entire conflict, and even before Russia intervened, for years, right? This is a standard U.S. tactic to escalate in very, very small degrees, such that when you do it, the other side is left with, well, do we escalate into steps that could lead to further escalation or could take us into direct conflict over just this small thing? And that's what they're attempting to do here. Does Putin strike the U.S. or strike a U.S. military base or provide anti-ship missiles to Houthis to strike a U.S. warship because they allowed for strikes just in a small region of Kursk, right? That is an argument, right? One side will say that it doesn't matter how thin the salami is sliced. You're slicing the salami. We recognize what you're doing, and we have to deter you from making any further escalation. And the other side of that is, especially with Trump coming in, it's simply not worth it. We can already bring down these ATACMS 7 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10 anyway. And so that argument will be, is raging. I'm almost certain in the Kremlin, or has
So
been.
wait, real quick, is that what you think is going on then? The thought is, okay, we need to provoke the Russians in order to get them more ingratiated with it, basically to give ourselves a reason to go further into the conflict where Trump
I think part of the reason that Biden, so for Biden's motivation, there's a couple of reasons. One is simply hatred and spite for both Putin and Trump, whom the man obviously hates both, right? Yeah. The Pentagon has already been clear. They're against this, right? They think that this will result in no significant military effects for Ukraine, right? For the Kiev regime. It will not change anything on the battlefield. They've made clear that the targets, the airfields that the Kiev regime supposedly wants to hit are well out of range. Russia's operating their aircraft well out of range of the ATACMS, and that this would be a needless escalation for minuscule military benefit. So this is not a military decision. This is a political decision. Another possible motivation is the fact that Biden is concerned about, at least what is in his mind, his legacy. He doesn't want to leave the field with the argument hanging out there. Oh, we could have won this war if only Biden had done this. And this is one of the last things that he hasn't done. So he's got some reason in terms of a legacy for providing it out the door. Also, in doing it, I believe in the way that he's doing, he thinks that he can do it, particularly knowing that Putin knows that Trump is coming into office in 2 months, and avoid any Russian response. Right. So the opposite, I would, of what you suggested there. They think they can do this here and now and get no response, because they're slicing it so thinly, and when they're slicing it, just before they exit the stage. And Russia's got to seriously weigh all of those things, what its own intelligence about the incoming elect Trump's decision-making processes and all this. We've already seen at least a post by Elon Musk seeming to condemn this on Twitter.
Jr. too.
And Donald Trump Jr. Not that they evidently have that much say, because it wasn't long ago that Donald Trump Jr. was saying we have to prevent any neocons from coming into the administration at all. And it's like 95% neocons, right? So Donald Trump Jr. may not have all that much say over what his daddy's doing. Just saying. So, I mean, it's a lot hanging out there right now. And it must be said that the timing is, I believe that this decision, right, this isn't something that happened in the last 48 hours, right? It's been coming before. But perhaps, whichever came first, Russia has also launched 2 significant escalations in the last week. The first one is they have begun a whole new offensive front in the south, in Zaporozhye, pushing north from Roboltina, and also in the area of the Vremovsky salient. So that is, going well past, where the Kiev regime launched their failed 2023 summer offensive from. So that's a whole new front that the Kiev regime is going to have. They already have the manpower woes. They can't handle another front. There's no question. Also, Russia has sent at least, we don't know how big, there is some suspicion that it's just DRG, diversion and reconnaissance groups, but in the north has sent troops into the Chernigov region of Ukraine from the Bryansk region of Russia, which has not seen significant military developments, at least since the beginning of the first few months of the conflict. And according to reports, Russia has taken a couple of villages there on the ground. So that is the potential for another direction headed in.
Wow.
Now, also on top of that, overnight, Russia launched huge missile and drone strikes on Ukraine, perhaps the biggest of the war thus far.
Yeah.
According to the Kiev regime, we don't have the Russian official take yet, but according to the Kiev regime, at least 120 missiles and 90 drones. And the
Wow.
drones was the entire gambit of Russian missiles, right? From ballistic missiles like the Iskander to sea-launched cruise missiles like the Caliber, to the hypersonic missiles like the Zircon and the Kinjal, also the KH-101 and others, right? And the primary target was indeed, as has long been suspected, the Kiev regime's electrical infrastructure. So the dark winter scenario is obviously a thing. The Russian government is going to shut the lights, the power, the heat, the water off in Ukraine over the winter months. Which
Mark?
definitely should be seen as an escalation. The potential there, of course, is to drive the Kiev regime's logistics and its military industrial complex, such as it is in underground workshops, down to nothing, but also to, of course, have an effect on the civilian population and potentially drive millions of more refugees into Europe. So that's a big scenario too. So we're seeing escalations on both sides right here on the eve of the new president of the change of power in the United States, and the Kiev regime forces still just continue crumbling, particularly in the Donbass, in the south central Donbass area. They're barely able to slow Russian forces down at this point. And now these new offensives in other places.
Well, Mark, man, I always appreciate your take on this stuff. I when this first happened, my thought was, oh my God, what the hell is Joe Biden doing? And I couldn't tell whether it was, okay, this is him trying to provoke, or if it was the other way, that, it's like, okay, well, if Russia can knock these down, is it, for prosperity?
I think it's a sneak parting shot.
Yeah, I agree with you. It seems to be more of spite than anything else. Mm-hmm. Mark, man, always appreciate you, Mark. I'm sorry I couldn't get you longer for today, but always appreciate you. Always so informative. Mark Sleboda, he's an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1 and on his YouTube channel, A Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. Check out Mark's channel. He knows his stuff. Man, thank you for this. The audience have even pointed out, they said Mark has been right about this all the way through. He's like, yeah, he has. So keep it up, Mark.
Thanks, I wasn't, and I hope I'm wrong.
On some of the stuff, I hope you're wrong too, because this is going to be worse before it gets better. But we'll see. We'll be together. Have a good one, man. Thank you. All right. Let's